Hello everyone. So today we're going to get into how to find the percent of a number. So what types of questions do I need to be able to do by the end of the lesson? So to describe part of a group, we often use fractions or sometimes a percent. So here are a few examples of those types of problems. So first kind is, let's say there was a vote and 43 out of 64 students voted for Leslie. So what percent would that represent? Another kind of question would be, Tim answered 80% of the 50-question quiz correctly. So how many problems did he get correct if he got 80% correct? So let's go ahead and get into the lesson now. You guys should be at the bottom of your classwork 5, that's where your notes begin. So finding the percent of a number. So we also use percents to describe financial situations such as music CDs were on sale for 30% off. The regular price, we want to know what the new price is. The sales tax is 7%. So what does that mean when I purchase something that's 30 bucks or even 40 or whatnot? The bank pays 3% interest on a savings account, so I have $500 in there. How much interest am I going to be getting and how often? All right, so what does finding the percent of a number actually mean? So when it comes to the percent, we mean we want a fraction of something. We want a piece of something. So you guys should be filling this part in. So we want the fraction, or we can also use a decimal. Sometimes people find it easier to use that, of some amount. So the number is always the amount we are given. So whether it be 10 or 1,000 or 53 or $85. So we are going to be given an amount, and we are going to be finding a fraction of that amount. So that's what it means. So at the end of the day, we are just finding the fraction of an amount or the fraction of a number. So let's go ahead and look at some examples now. So when we are asked to find a certain percent of a number, we usually change the percent to either a fraction or a decimal. So again, we want to exchange because we cannot multiply, add, subtract with percents if we're dealing with regular numbers. So we have to change percents and fractions to, percents to fractions and or decimals. Again, the decimal is preferable just because it's easier to work with and faster. And that's what we do before we perform any calculations. So let's go ahead and look at that. So we have 25%. That means we can use 25 over 100 because percent means per 100. So that number over 100. Or move the decimal twice to the left, which means 0.25. Same thing with something like 5%. The 5% is a tricky one because if we have 5%, this is not, so it's 5 over 100. But it is not, and actually let's go ahead and erase that. 5% means 5 out of 100. But it is not, so I'm just going to put this on the side. You don't have to write this down. 0.5. So this is a common mistake, putting 0.5. Remember, when you're finding a percent to a decimal, you have to move the decimal twice over. That's once, which makes it at 5. And if you move it one more time, you have to drop a 0 there. So this would actually be 0.05. Not 5.5. So let's go ahead and make sure you write that correctly. So make sure it's 0.05 on your paper, not 0.5, because 0.5 would technically be 50%. All right, let's go ahead and move on. So let's actually do some examples. These are all on the back of your handout. So let's get to it. We can translate this type of problem into an equation. So when I ask, what is 75% of 20? So this word of means we multiply because we want a fraction thereof. We want a piece of 20. So of 20, the word of means multiply. So we're going to go ahead and figure this out. So I'm going to translate 75% into its decimal value, 2 places to the left, or just divided by 100. Of is going to translate to the multiplication. So I'm going to use a dot, or if you prefer, you can use the X. It doesn't matter. I think some of us might prefer the X just because we don't want to mess it up with a 0.75, so I'll put an X for these, although you can use a dot. And 20 stays 20. And we just go ahead and multiply these. So I end up getting 15 as my final answer. Again, I would encourage using the calculator just for time's sake, but if you want to actually do the multiplication on your own, feel free to do so. Let's go ahead and move on to number 2. So how much money is 8% of $15? So again, 8%. We move the decimal twice over. Oops, let's go ahead and fix that. All right, once twice, so that's 0.08. Remember, the single digit numbers always have that 0. Of means multiply, and $15 is just 15. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply that. So if I multiply 0.08 times 15, I'm going to get 1.2. Since we're talking about money, I need to have 2 decimal places, so I'm going to add a 0 to the end of this, and I'm going to put my dollar sign on it. All right, let's go ahead and move on to number 3. And we have Jamal correctly answered 80% of the 25 questions. How many questions did he answer correctly? So again, we're going to focus on our most important part is 80% of the 25 questions. So that's going to be 0.80 times the 25 questions that he got right. So we want the fraction 0.80, or the 80 out of 100 of 25 questions. So we're going to go ahead and multiply 0.80 or 0.8, same thing, times 25. That gives me 20, which means Jamal got 20 questions correct. Make sure we're writing this out. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Number 4, we have the sales tax rate was 6%. Find the tax on a $12 purchase, then find the total price including tax. So we have something that costs 12 bucks. Sorry about that. Let's go back. All right, so we have a 6% tax, and we want something that costs $12, and then we want to find the total. So we're going to do 6%, 0.06, decimal twice to the left, times the $12. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply these. That gives me 72.72. Because we're working with money, I'm going to go ahead and put the 0 up front. So it's 72 cents. So that's how much taxes we're going to pay. So if my item was $12, I'm going to add 72 cents to it. I'm going to make sure I line this up nicely. So that would be $12.72. I'm sure most of you guys could have done it mentally without having to write it out. But I want to make sure you guys have it in front of you to see it. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next problem. So Eric sold 80% of his 30 baseball cards. How many baseball cards did he sell? So we're going to go ahead and start taking our 80%. 80 out of 100 would be 0.80 out of times 30 baseball cards. So we want 80% of 30. So we want 80% of the amount 30. We go ahead and multiply 0.80 times 30. That's going to give us 24. So he sold 24 cards. Let's go ahead and move on to number 6. The sales tax is 9.5%. Estimate the tax on an $11 purchase. So we got to be very careful with this one because our percent has a decimal on it. So I'm going to actually write this one out. I'm going to move my decimal twice to the left. So that's 0.095. And we're going to multiply that by 11. So we got to be very careful when there's a decimal within the percent because usually there tends to be a mistake on the conversion. So take the time and write it out. So now we're going to have 0.095 times 11. And that gives us 1.045. But again, we're talking about money. Money does not have 3 decimal places. It goes to the hundredths, not the thousandths. So we're going to cut that off. So that would make my tax on the $11 purchase to be $1, and this right here is 5. So 5 and bigger rounds up. So we're going to go up. That's going to be $1.05 of tax. All right, so that's pretty much the idea of finding the percent of a number. We just multiply. So remember, the word of means multiply. But what if we're asked a different kind of question? What if the question is, find the percent? What is the percent of some situation given? So in this case, we're going to compare the part that we are given with the total to find the percent. So you guys have this on your paper. So the part goes on the top, the total goes on the bottom. I have 5 out of 7 or 6 over 10 or something over something. And we just do long division or division on the calculator and get the percent, move the decimal twice. All right, so let's go ahead and look at a few of these examples. Angel invites 40 of his friends to his birthday bash. Only 31 of them can make it. What percent of his friends can make it? So we have 31 people who can make it out of 40. So we're just going to take this and convert it into a fraction, which just becomes 31 over 40. And to convert a fraction into a decimal, we just take 31 first, division 40. So 31 divided by 40. And that becomes 0.775. Now, currently it's a decimal. Now we need to convert this into a percent. So I'm going to move the decimal once, twice to the right. That gives me 77.5%. So 77.5% of the people can come to Angel's party. Let's go ahead and check a few more examples on this topic. So on your tryout for the volleyball team, you hit the ball 4 times out of 7 attempts. What is your percent? So it should be more than half because 4 is more than half of 7. So let's go ahead and say 4 out of 7. We're going to write down that fraction. 4 out of 7. We're going to go ahead and do some division. 4 divided by 7. In that order, type it in your calculator, or feel free to check it with long division. So we get something about 0.5714, and it keeps going. I'm not going to write the rest of the numbers down. And we're going to move the decimal twice to the right. Notice I wrote enough decimal places 4, so I can do this. And this equals 57.14. And I'm going to round it for just general sakes. We're going to round it to the tenths always. So let's just do 57.1% because this 4 is not big enough to round it up. It stays. So you made about 57.1% of your shots. All right, let's go ahead and move on to number 3. I have a few more to go. You go on a summer trip and visit 15 out of the 50 U.S. states. What percentage you visit? So 15 out of 50. So you do 15 divided by 50 on your calculator. All right, you should have gotten 0.3. We're going to convert this to a percent. Means decimal moves twice to the right. So we drop a 0 since there's a blank here. So my answer is 30%. All right, let's go ahead and keep on going. On a practice ACT, you got 53 out of the 65 English questions correct. So, oops, let's try it again. So 53 out of 65. What is your percent? Let's go ahead and type it in. 53 out of 65. We get 0.8. I'm going to write 5 of these decimal places so I can round it afterwards. I'm going to move my decimal to make it a percent, and I'm going to cut it off after one place here. So that's going to be 81.5, or is it going to be 81.6? So I got to look at this guy. So this one's going to keep it at 5. It's not large enough. So 81.5. Let's go on to the next one. We have 2 to go. We're almost there. So we have, you buy a bag of Skittles, 29 out of the 55. Oh, you ate 29 out of 55. So let's write that out. 29 out of 55. It's a lot of Skittles. How many did you eat in percents? All right, so 29 out of 55. We got to eat 0.52, 72, 72, 72, and it repeats. We're going to move our decimal twice to the right to make it a percent, and we're going to cut it off in the tenths. So that gives me 52. This 2 is not large enough to round up, so it stays a 7. All right, last one. We're almost there. All right, you're opening Oreo cookies, and your friend accidentally bumps into you, and you drop 12 of your cookies on the floor. You had 40 cookies in the bag, so if there were 40 cookies, what percent went to waste? So you lost cookies. So you lost 12 out of your 40 cookies. So now we're going to go ahead and divide this out to see what percent we get after we divide these. So we got 0.3. Move our decimal twice to the right. We're going to drop in that 0. So we end up getting 30% of the cookies were wasted. All right, so that's pretty much the general idea. Now, there are a few extra videos on Canvas just to get more review, and if you want additional practice or examples, just go ahead and check out those videos. Not required, they're optional. Otherwise, get started on your practice, and good luck.